It all starts with hiring the right people. We will start there, and this actually starts to happen before you even look at a resume or talk to a candidate. Your employer brand is the information that candidates use to decide if they're interested in working for you or not. One of the first things that helps establish your employer brand is your job description. Aside from just telling them what the duties of the work are and what requirements you're looking for, at Canopy, we also include information that tell them why they want to work with us. So we talk about different benefits and perks that we have. We talk about our culture and our company values. We even have a section on our job description that specifically invites women and minority candidates to apply for our job, even if they don't meet all of the requirements, because research tells us that they're less likely to apply for a job if they don't meet 100% of the requirements. So this really reduces your candidate pool if they're looking at it and saying, hey, I don't meet all of them, I'm probably not going to apply. Having a great job description can be a really useful tool in getting candidates to actually apply for your role. In addition to a great job description, I want to encourage you to have an up-to-date LinkedIn and Glassdoor profile. So James talked about the importance of a Google profile. When it comes to hiring and recruiting top talent, LinkedIn and Glassdoor are that for you as well. Make sure that you have an employer page for both LinkedIn and Glassdoor with information that talk about what your firm does and other things that may be really helpful for them to get to know you better and decide if they want to work for you. If you are not proactively managing your Glassdoor page, you're going to end up with reviews that are from very unhappy ex-employees or candidates that interviewed with you and you didn't hire. And usually those are not the reviews that you want to show up for potential candidates to read. So I strongly encourage you to take the time to proactively manage your Glassdoor page. Candidates use this all the time. I cannot tell you the number of times that I've been talking to a candidate in an interview and they've told me, I can't believe what a great Glassdoor page you have at Canopy. You have such a high rating. The reviews were so great. I'm really excited to talk to you. And you can have a great Glassdoor page as well and a great rating. We actively manage this by inviting our employees to leave reviews. We invite new hires when they hit 60 days to leave a review for us. We invite people who are involved in our hiring process because they're really committed to getting the best people on board. And we like to keep it fresh and make sure that there's new postings on a regular basis. This really, really helps as candidates to get to know us, to see the information we want them to see. So make sure that you take time to do that. And the good news is LinkedIn and Glassdoor are 100% free, so you don't have to spend any money on this. It's just a little bit of your time, great job description, a LinkedIn profile, a Glassdoor profile with some relevant reviews, and you're good to go. Now, if you want to take it a step further and really start building your employer brand, let's say you're doing a lot of hiring over the next 12 months. There's something you can do in addition to this. You can add content to places that candidates or potential candidates are frequenting so that they get to know you a lot better well before you have a job posting. Candidates are on LinkedIn, they're on Instagram, they're on TikTok. They are in these places, and if you start building and posting content, they're going to get to know you well before you have a job posting. It can sound really overwhelming to think about coming up with content for social media platforms when you're running a firm and you're super busy and it's the tax season. So ChatGPT is your friend. It's going to help take care of it. If you have a really good prompt, AI will give you everything that you need to manage social content. This is an example of a prompt that you can use. It starts out by setting a persona. In this case, it's saying you're a social media consultant. It provides specific direction for what we're looking for, 25 social media posts. And it gives a tone. You can adjust this to however professional or casual your firm is. and then specifically state what you're looking for and what you're not looking for. In this case, it said, please do not sound like a sales pitch. Once you get all of this put into ChatGPT, you can have 25, 30 posts generated really quickly for you to review. And then you can queue those up and schedule them on your social media platform to post on the date that you want. So you can set it and forget it. You're done for a whole entire month. And this can be really, really powerful to help potential candidates start to hear about your firm with relevant information long before you have a job opening. So once you get your employer brand up and running, it's also helpful to know where to post jobs. LinkedIn and Indeed both have free job boards that you can use. They also have paid job boards, so if you really want to highlight a job posting, you can use that, but you can use their job posting boards for free. Local universities are great for interns, new college grads, alumni, and the Journal of Accountancy has a job board you can use as well if you're looking for more accounting relevant hiring. There are a lot of Facebook accounting groups out there, and those are great places to share the jobs that you have open with local accounting professionals. Accounting Fly is an option, and we're also finding a lot of accountants are on Reddit as well. So that's another place that you can also check out and see if there are people there who are interested in jobs. One of my all-time favorites is the employee referral. At Canopy, over 30% of all of the people that we hire on an annual basis come from employee referrals. And the great thing about the employee referral is they're people that the members of your team already know, and your team's pretty invested in working with good people, so they're going to screen out those people that you kind of don't want to hire. We offer a referral bonus for every single referral who gets hired and makes it to the 90-day point. And that referral bonus is well worth the quality of candidates that we get and the speed for which we are able to hire. So that's definitely something you can look at if you're doing a lot of hiring. So once you get those resumes rolling in the door and you've got candidates to screen, it's worth thinking about how you approach those interviews. Before you talk to a single candidate, it is super important to think about what you're really looking for. What skills do you need? What characteristics do you need? Knowing this before you talk to anyone helps you objectively review each of the candidates that you talk to. I recommend using a consistent set of questions across all of your candidates so that you can compare them fairly and consistently, but also so that you can compare them to what you're looking for and make sure that you're asking questions that get you the right candidates. Another thing that can be really powerful when you're interviewing is asking behavior-based questions. The single biggest predictor of future success is past behavior. I'm going to say this again. The single biggest predictor of future success is past behavior. How do we find out how people have acted in the past? Well, we ask them using behavior-based questions. What this looks like is rather than say, tell me about a time you had to, or let me swap that. Rather than ask them, how would you handle a grumpy client? You can ask them, tell me about a time you had to work with a grumpy client and how did you handle it? This will tell you how they've behaved in the past, and you can make sure that that tracks with what you're looking for in the future. These behavior-based questions are really, really helpful. Another really important thing, beyond just getting the technical skills that you're looking for, is making sure they're gonna fit with your firm. A lot of times, depending on the firm size, the team culture, someone that has the skills may still not be a good fit for your team, and it's important to ask questions that help you evaluate that. At Canopy, our company values our own win, do good, and curiosity and candor. And every single candidate that we interview, we ask them questions to help us understand if they match our company values. This is a really important thing to consider. A lot of misfits with hiring aren't necessarily due to technical skills. You can teach technical skills, but what you can't teach is culture fit. So make sure you take the time to screen candidates for fitting your culture. I have hired thousands of people in my career, and I've interviewed 20 times that amount of people. And as I've gone through this hiring experience, I've learned a few things about what makes a good candidate and what might be a red flag. So when you're reviewing the resumes, watch for things like poor formatting and errors and typos, especially if the job is one that requires a lot of attention to detail. Also look for job hopping. If you have a candidate who applies and they change jobs every 12 to 18 months, that could be an indicator that either it's kind of hard to satisfy them and they may be there for 12 months and then leave and you've invested all of that training in them, or it may be an indicator that their performance isn't stellar and they're being moved along pretty quickly from their past employers. So that is something worth paying attention to. When you start talking with them, if they're talking negatively about their current or past employer, you can bet if you hire them, they will talk negatively about you to their friends, to their family, to their coworkers in the break room. So this is something to pay attention to if it comes up in the interview. If they're generally disinterested when you're talking to them, this can be an indication that they don't have a lot of enthusiasm for the role, so that's something to consider. If you're asking them specific questions and they're kind of talking around those questions, talking about other things, this can be an indication that perhaps they don't have the knowledge to answer the question, or perhaps they don't have the skill in listening and communicating to be able to answer the question you're asking, things that are important when we're hiring. If they don't ask any questions in the interview process, this could be a concern. We expect our candidates to evaluate us just as much as we're evaluating them in the interview process. And if they make any comments or are asking questions that are unaligned to your culture, this could be a red flag. An example of this may be if they're asking you about vacation time, how much time off they can take, can they come in late, what's the flexibility on working from home, and those things are not part of your company culture. Even if they have the right technical skills, that can be an indication that they might not be a good culture fit for you. Here are a few quick hiring tips that I've found to be really helpful in my career. Move fast. Good candidates are in high demand, and they're typically talking to several different companies. So move quickly. You don't need to compare 5 or 6 candidates to each other. If you know what you're looking for, when you find it, you can go ahead and move quickly with them through the interview process. And if you're interviewing over several weeks, make sure that you communicate often in the process to candidates that you're excited about. At least once a week, check in with them. It's also a really good idea to set clear expectations at the beginning of the interview process. So if you have a 3-step interview process, tell them that, and they can match their expectations to it. If you're doing a lot of hiring, I strongly encourage you to consider using technology. There are some really affordable applicant tracking systems that not only help you keep track of all of the resumes and the applicants and the communication with them, but they also link to free job boards, giving your job postings more visibility, and they also help you keep scorecards and notes. So if you keep getting that candidate who keeps applying and they're terrible, you can kind of automatically disqualify them because you have notes on them. Jazz HR, Breezy HR, those are some really, really affordable and relatively quick setup platforms that you can use for hiring. And make sure that you're keeping your job posting fresh. So about every 2 to 3 weeks, your job posting is going to get pretty far down on job boards, and it's going to be hard for candidates to find. And so if you're still hiring after 2 to 3 weeks, it's a great idea to pull your job posting down and repost it so it gets put right back up on top of those job boards. This last one is something that I tell every single hiring manager that I work with. If a candidate is not a yes, it's a no. If they're okay, but they're not a yes and you're not excited about them, it's better to just pass on them. And I have made this mistake personally as well. My team was super busy, we were doing a ton of work, everybody was feeling a little burnout, we were trying to get somebody in the door, and we talked to a candidate, They were okay. The resume was good, the interview was kind of meh, but we couldn't point to anything specifically that was a problem. Well, we talked to a few more candidates, came back to this candidate, decided to hire them, and on their first day, it was super clear we had made a mistake. We tried to give them some coaching, we tried to train them. We spent about 45 days trying to make this person fit, and it was just a bad hire. So we ended up having to move them out of the organization. That was really unpleasant for them, and it was a big waste of our time to train somebody who wasn't going to be a fit. So if it's not a yes when you talk to a candidate, it is a no, and it's okay to let them move on. So once you've got a great candidate and you're ready to go, how do you set them up to be successful? An onboarding experience is a really great way to make sure that they're set up for success. An employee who experiences a good onboarding experience is 18 times more likely to be engaged. 18, that's huge, just by making sure there's an engaging onboarding experience. So at Canopy, when we think about onboarding an employee, it starts from the time they accept the offer until about the 90-day point. It's not just day one. There's a lot of room there. So before they even show up for their first day of work, we make sure that we send them all of their new hire paperwork, all of those forms we hate that are really annoying. We get those sent over so that they can get them filled out before their first day of work. We also make sure that they have key information to help aid their first day and their first week. This may sound super obvious, but starting a new job is super stressful. And if you have information to help you plan, it makes it way less stressful. We make sure we tell them what time to show up, where to park, what to wear. What do people typically wear in the office? That's important to know. We even tell them things like, what should they plan to do for lunch their first day? Usually it's come to lunch with us because we're gonna take you to lunch, which is something else we can talk about in a minute. But that key information can be really helpful in reducing stress. We also make sure that workstations set up, their laptop is set up for their first day. Several years ago, I was doing consulting for this really small startup that was growing very, very fast. And they were hiring a lot of technical engineers, really hard to hire roles. And on their first day, they would come in, be presented with a box, which was their desk from IKEA, and they had to assemble it and then set up their own laptop. It was not a great experience for them at all, and it was a huge waste of time because they weren't doing the work that they were good at. So to the extent that you can, make sure that their workstation is set up and ready to go. And every employee that starts at Canopy has an onboarding plan. This onboarding plan explains about the company, about our customers, what their job is. It also gives them goals for their first 30, 60, 90 days. It highlights people that they should plan to meet with, reoccurring meetings that they're going to see on their schedule, and it includes a lot of quick links for material that they'll want to reference over the first 90 days. The great news is once you create an onboarding plan for one employee, with very little modification, you can use it for all your employees. So it's a really great resource to have. During the first week, we like to make sure that there's great team introductions. And this goes beyond walking them around the office and saying, there's John, there's Jane, say hi. We actually want to create some time for them to have a conversation and start building a connection. Research tells us people are much more engaged in their job if they have a friend at work. And you can enable that by creating a space for them to start assimilating with their new team and start to build some of that community. We also like to use that first week to give them access to all of the systems and accounts that they're going to need to use their job, to do their jobs. I know accountants have a lot of different softwares that you use day to day, so getting all of that set up for them their first week is really, really helpful. It is also really important to set clear expectations. That first week is a perfect time to tell them what you're expecting at 30, 60, and 90 days. Even for more experienced employees, it's still a really good idea to tell them what you expect of them so that they can match your expectations. Research has also taught us that you add value in a meaningful way early on, and you'll be more engaged in your job. So if you can find a way to get them to be contributing in that first week, look for some low-hanging fruit that they can feel like they're participating. It's really helpful in getting them engaged really quickly. It's one of the reasons we like to get all of that administrative stuff taken care of as soon as possible so they can get right into the work. And providing regular feedback. In the first week, I recommend you take the opportunity to provide feedback. It can be good job type feedback, or it can be, hey, let's adjust this a little bit so that it works better for how our company runs. As a really young manager, I made a huge misstep when it comes to feedback. I had a new hire start and they made a mistake. And it was kind of not a big mistake, it was kind of a little mistake, so I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want them to be disengaged. Waited a week, guess what? They made the same mistake. But now it was super awkward for me to say something because I didn't say anything the week before. So I still didn't say anything. Pretty soon, a couple weeks go by, and now the team is telling me, hey, have you noticed this is happening? So then I had to address it, and it was so much more awkward than it would have been had I just pulled them aside and said, can I give you a little feedback? Here is how we handle this. This will help you as you ramp up. And it would have literally been a non-issue, and they wouldn't have remembered it. And now it's like 15 years later, and I still think about it sometimes at night when I'm trying to fall asleep. So don't make it awkward. Let them know that feedback is a normal part of your process, and it's nothing to be afraid of. They should expect it. It's a good thing. No matter how hard we try to hire right, sometimes we miss. And there's no way around it. Sometimes it just happens. Our goal is when we hire someone, if it's not a good fit, we fail fast. We figure it out, we give them feedback, and if they can't make an improvement, it's time to move them on so they can go find the place that's right for them, and we can find and invest in and train the person that's right for us. These are a few red flags that we've come across that might help you identify a new hire that maybe isn't a good fit. So if someone isn't catching on quickly, they ask you a question, you answer it. They ask you that question again, you answer it again. They're not taking notes, or maybe they are taking notes, but they're not reading their notes. They aren't referencing written processes that you've established to help them do their job. These can all be an indication that they're not catching on quickly, and it could be due to lack of motivation or lack of intellectual horsepower in order to be able to do the job. So that's something to keep in mind. If they're making early requests for exceptions, look, we're all humans, things come up, life happens, but if they're making a pattern of exceptions, I'm gonna be late, can I work from home? I need to take my dog to the groomer, I need to do this, and it's all in those early weeks or month, it might be an indication that you have a little bit of a challenge. The next one is a big one. If you have a new hire who's not receptive to feedback, either when you give them the feedback, they listen, but they don't implement it, or worse, if they get defensive and they want to argue about this, you may have hired somebody who's not going to be a fit. Not once in my professional career have I seen someone who cannot take feedback, course correct, and end up being a high performer at a company. So if you're running into issues early on with feedback, it may make sense to just move them on so that you can get the right person there who can get some coaching and get some feedback. If you end up with unexpected conflicts, that might be an indication that you have an issue. A while ago, we ended up with an employee who called his manager and said, hey, I can't come into work today. I went a little too hard at the gym last night and my calves hurt, so I'm gonna miss it. And I'm not making this up, this really happened. The manager politely said, I'm sorry, that's not a reason you're going to miss work. You gotta come in. The employee immediately launched into this combative dialogue about how the manager didn't care about them, didn't support him, didn't care he was limping. It was a whole thing. We pretty quickly moved that employee out of the company. especially because it was a really nice manager. This wasn't a manager who was super mean and super grumpy and unsupportive. If you have employees who are good, cooperative employees who are experiencing conflict with a new hire, that can be a red flag. If they're appearing disengaged and disinterested really early on, that's a problem. We had a new hire who started, and on his first day in new hire orientation, he was so disengaged. I don't think he smiled once in his whole first day. And we're a pretty fun group. I mean, you guys have probably seen our booth over there. We're fun. We're lots of fun. He didn't smile once. And that really was the experience we had with him while he was at our company. He didn't enjoy being there, and that really rubs off on other people. So that's something to keep in mind early on with a new hire. And if you run into that new hire who right out the gate wants to talk about promotions and pay raises and when do they get to be a manager and what about their career growth, and you're still going, I need you to learn how to do your job first, that can also mean that there's an expectation mismatch where they think they're going to go one way and what the company needs is something different. So that's something to keep an eye on as well. So you have established your employer branding, you've recruited and hired some great people, you've onboarded them super well. That's great, but it doesn't do a whole lot if you're not working to engage your team. When it comes to engaging your employees, there's a lot of different things that you can do, especially to keep those top performers, your rock stars. But if you don't get one thing right, it kind of doesn't matter how well you do the rest. It doesn't matter how many snacks you have in the break room, what cool office swag you have. If you don't get this right, it won't make a difference. And then that is the manager. The manager of your employees is the biggest impactor on workplace happiness. Managers not only profoundly shape the work experience of their teams, they also impact the quality of life of the human beings that work for you and their families. We have a moral imperative as managers to make sure we do this well. It impacts not just your employees, but their families. I want to share some research with you. Gallup is one of the largest researchers on employee engagement in the world. And they did some research in 2020 to find out how people were faring during the pandemic. And they found that it really depended on one single factor, the manager. So if the manager was supportive and engaged, they experienced much more engagement and general overall well-being in their life. They stated that their life was significantly better as a result of the pandemic. On the other hand, if they had a disengaged manager that wasn't supportive, they stated that they had higher stress levels, lower productivity, and lower overall well-being, stating that their life was worse due to the pandemic, all because of the manager. It makes a huge difference. The research then went on to find what specific things a manager might do to help or hinder, and they found it largely had to do with three specific things, especially in times of high stress, like a global pandemic or tax season. They included frequent and clear communication from the manager, empathy, or a general feeling that their manager cared about them as a human being, and flexibility of schedule. These three things had the biggest impact in times of high stress. Practically speaking, what does this even look like? It looks like having regular one-on-ones with your employees, asking them how they are doing, and actually listening to them when they tell you, and providing flexibility of schedule, especially in those really, really busy days when things are super busy, everyone's working long hours. If you can create some flexibility in their work schedule, it will really help. Recognition is an important part of being a successful manager as well, and it's an important part of driving engagement. Probably not a surprise, but frequent recognition drives higher engagement, higher productivity, and better retention. And infrequent recognition drives disengagement, quiet quitting, and turnover, all things that we don't want to have. The research on recognition is really insightful. The Society for Human Resource Management found that lack of recognition was one of the top drivers of turnover, top drivers for why people leave their jobs, lack of recognition. Gallup found that employees who received recognition at least one time per week were twice as likely to be engaged in their job as someone who received recognition less frequently. Twice the level of engagement by taking the time to recognize them once per week. That's pretty doable. The Harvard Business Review research found that telling somebody, hey, good job, doesn't quite check the box for really making a meaningful impact to engagement. You actually need to take the time to say, why was it good, and what was it that they did, and why did it matter? So when you think about building engagement in your team and in your firm, remember, recognize efforts right after you see them, specifically and frequently, at least once a week, which is pretty doable. So outside of having a great manager and recognition, what do employees want? They want a stable work environment. That seems to be pretty important, especially in our economic climate these days. They want competitive benefits. And sometimes that can be a little scary if you're a small firm, but they're really just looking for competitive benefits based on the size of your company. They're not looking for anything that's not commensurate with the size of your firm. They want fair compensation. You know those high performers who do a ton of work for you? They just want to be paid fairly for the work that they do and the value that they add. And they want flexible work schedules. And I know that can be hard to hear, but this is here to stay. It is not going away. We hear it more and more, and as more Gen Z enter the workforce, it becomes louder and louder. Flexibility with an accounting firm can feel a little bit hard, but there are a lot of things that you can do. Extra time off following the tax deadlines, maybe doing a short day Friday for a couple weeks during the summer, or a Friday off a couple weeks or months during the summer. You can also help them find time to get out of the office to take care of their mental and their physical health. Maybe give them some flexibility to go to the gym or take a walk or meditate, especially when times are really, really stressful. Workplace flexibility can be more impactful in retaining people than a pay increase. A lot of times people won't leave their job if they have flexibility, even if they're offered more money, because that flexibility is increasingly more important to them. So how do you know how you're doing when it comes to engagement? Do you just have to wait until people walk out the door and leave? There are actually things that you can measure to help you understand how you're doing. Regular one-on-ones, I've already said it, but have those regular one-on-ones at least once a week if you can, no less than every other week. This helps you get a baseline for your employees and how they're doing, and when you see things dip, you'll know something's off and you can kind of dive into it and figure out what's up. State interviews are an incredibly powerful tool. This is an opportunity to meet with your A players, your best employees, and ask them, what keeps you here? What might entice you away? Is there anything we can do to make sure that we keep you? And those can be scary questions to ask, because what if they tell you something you can't offer? But what's scarier is what if you don't ask and it was something that was totally within your capability to do? Employee surveys are a great way to get information. We do quarterly anonymous surveys with our employees at Canopy. We get great feedback. We don't give them everything that they ask for, but a lot of times we'll see patterns and themes that help us understand ways we can continue to improve our culture. Absenteeism can be an area that shows some disengagement. So if your normally attentive employees are calling in more often, showing up late to work, missing meetings, that can be an indicator that maybe you have an engagement issue. Participation rates are really similar. So think about participating in optional activities, participating in speaking up during meetings, participating by raising their hand when there's a growth opportunity or a promotion opportunity. When you start to see that come down, that can be an indication that you have an engagement issue. And promotion rates are also something that are really helpful to understand engagement. If you look back the last 12 months at your firm, what percentage of your employees got a promotion, got a title increase, got more pay for taking on more work, or got a growth opportunity? That can also be an indication of an engagement issue if that rate is too low. The competition for accounting talent is real, and it is not going to get any better. That's just where we are at. But the good news is that firms that intentionally build strong hiring practices, meaningful onboarding experiences, and high engagement cultures will stand out. It starts before you talk to a single candidate with your employer brand. It continues with your hiring, onboarding, and engagement practices. And it lasts when you recognize your team, you listen to them, and you help grow them. These small actions done consistently will create extraordinary teams.